Welcome back, everybody, to my channel. Last week I reviewed Total Drama Island. This time I am reviewing Survivor Borneo, which is a pretty odd season of the show and definitely something production learned from, as they made a ton of mistakes here. Like, basically everything that they did with the editing style, and, like, Jeff Probst not hosting challenges is, like, very weird. And some of the contestants were like really adamant on not using alliances. So I decided to make a review so I could talk about my feelings on this season, episode by episode, and the idea for episode by episode reviews came from the Marooning review. Please go check out his channel. His channel is fantastic. He talks all about Survivor, Big Brother, The Amazing Race, and other reality shows and video games that he likes to talk about. So go visit his channel because that's where I got the idea of episode by episode reviewing. So yeah. Anyways, let's begin. All right, starting off with the first episode, the Marooning, which was a very weird premiere where it just seemed like Jeff Probst was like so unenthusiastic. Like, he just sounded so dry when he spoke. And that's basically him the entire season, where he doesn't do any narrating throughout the challenges, which is really weird to see as how Jeff Probst nowadays is basically commenting on every little motion everybody does. But here it's just kind of eh. But anyways, we start off with the Marooning, and the Pagan tribe, everything BB did was fantastic. Like, BB made these first two episodes for me. I loved BB in this. And on the Pagan tribe, we also had some very weird editing where the top four Pagan members, like Colleen, Jervis, Jenna, and Greg, the top four people who made it farthest on the Pagan tribe, they don't even get a confessional here. Like, they get no screen time at all, which is very odd from like an editing standpoint. Like, wouldn't you want to like make these characters who make it farther into the story more rootable? But I don't know. Anyways, on the Toggy tribe, which basically is the focal point of this episode because they go to tribal, basically all of them get screen time, and we start off with Richard and Sue just immediately arguing about corporate and corporate world and the redneck world, and how it won't work here. And we have Rich's famous "I'm the winner" quote, which blatant foreshadowing for the future. And at the challenge, Sonia trips, which causes Toggy to go to tribal council, and Stacy was being like Stacy is a fantastic character here, and so is Rudy. Like, Rudy and Stacy really make this first. Rudy, Stacy, and BB are like my three favorite parts of these first few episodes. But we get the Sonia boot, who I forgot to talk about this earlier, but Sonia was part of one of my favorite scenes, where she's sitting down there with Richard singing Bye Bye Blues on her ukulele, and it's such a wholesome moment, and I love it as like this is the most wholesome part in the show's history. But anyways, Sonia is voted out, and Sonia was a mech character. Other than her Bye Bye Blues ukulele song, she brought nothing to the table, and I didn't really care for her other than that. And Richard and Sonia really formed the first Tommy and her mommy, Tommy and Janet, Malcolm and Denise, like, little thing, but obviously it didn't last long here. Moving on to episode 2, The Generation Gap, which probably is the best episode of the pre-merge, where on the Pagan tribe, BB is pissing people off by being really bossy, but Jenna is taking a liking to BB as he's a very strong worker. On the Toggy tribe, we have Rudy pissing Stacy off and Stacy pissing the rest of the tribe off, which is really funny. And Stacy's like all adamant about like, Rudy's gotta go, when it's like, people like Rudy, people don't like you. It's like, what are you doing? Like, just shut up. But the challenge was really fun where Jervis has to eat like food, just has to eat like a maggot, and he's like, while he's putting it in his mouth, he's like jumping up and down and like hitting his head. It's a very funny moment, but Pagan goes to tribal council, and the most heartbreaking moment in Survivor history happens, and BB is voted. Oh my god, that's very much not good. And BB is voted out, and BB was my favorite part of these first two episodes. Like, BB is such a fantastic character. Like, his arguments with Joel were fantastic. His just like little demean, his like controlling personality, and his hard-working personality too is also pretty good. But it was so heartbreaking to me when he died, and it's also heartbreaking to me how he was voted out second. But he basically just quit and was voted out 6-2. Moving on to episode 3, it's called Quest for Food, where this was probably the worst episode so far. Like, I barely remember anything that happens. I mean, Ramona's sick, like, because Ramona gets sick a lot. But this episode is just kind of boring, and we do get a pretty good character in Stacy going home, and Stacy was a really fun character on this season. I really enjoyed her. Her always targeting Rudy, and her being like, me and Rudy, we're not going to be friends after this, and they're like buddies outside of the game. But then like Stacy's a fun character, and she sadly won't be back anytime soon. She probably won't be back ever due to her suing CBS. But, yeah, she technically is the first person to ever start an alliance with her and Kelly. But, yeah, she was a pretty good player. She just had a terrible social game. Moving on to Too Little Too Late, where Greg finally becomes a breakout star, which is amazing. We have Ramona finally working, and still not getting love from people except for Jenna, because Jenna loves everybody. On the Toggy tribe, Dirk is starting to piss people off with his little preaching, and then we get a pretty boring boot where Ramona goes home, and Ramona was a pretty fun character these few episodes. Like, if it wasn't for her being sick all the time, she probably would have been less boring. She probably would have been more boring than she was on TV, but she was a pretty okay character on the show, and her going home right here is probably the correct time. All right, moving on to Pulling Your Own Weight, which this is boring. I mean, other than Kelly losing to Jervis in the challenge and the Dirk blindside, was a really fun moment. But anyways, Kelly, who's a water river guide, I don't know how to pronounce that, loses to somebody who can't swim in Jervis. Like, how does she lose this challenge? She does literally kayaking every day, and she loses a challenge to Jervis, a guy who can't swim, but whatever. We get Dirk being really cocky before Tribal, being like, I'm pretty confident that I'm going to be here next episode. But then the alliance finally blossoms with Rudy, Kelly, Sue, and Richard, and all four of them vote to eliminate Dirk. And Dirk was pretty boring except for his last 2 episodes. I mean, his first 3 episodes, he was just there. And then his last 2 episodes, he was just kind of like being picked on by everybody except for Sean. So, yeah, I didn't really see him lasting long, but he was the first ever victim to an alliance, so that's something. All right, moving on to Utter Revenge, where we get the first mentioning of Joel and Jervis being misogynistic little chauvinists, but we get Jervis's comment about we hear about Jervis's comment about how girls are the stupidest thing next to cows. But this season's editing is really strange, because instead of a show standpoint, they do a tell standpoint, where they don't show any of these events happening, but they still have all of the people talk about it, which is really strange. But anyways, Joel is really cocky, being like, I wonder what'll happen in the merge. It's such a huge game changer. And he gets voted out, which Joel was okay. I didn't care for him. I wasn't rooting for him. I wasn't rooting against him. I didn't really want him to win, and he didn't win. If he made it to the merge, I don't know what would have happened with him, but yeah, he's pretty boring, so that's something. Moving on to the merger, where we get the merge, and it's amazing. Greg in this episode is fantastic, along with Richard. And the teams come together, and the immunity challenge. Greg wins immunity, and then we move on to to tribal council, where at tribal council it's a really crazy vote, where literally all but 2 people who aren't immune get, and like 7 out of the 9 people who were eligible to get votes got votes. Like it was a 4 to 1 to 1 to 1 to 1 to 1 to 1 tribal council, where Gretchen got 4 votes from the Toggy Alliance, and everybody else just shot their votes everywhere else. But Gretchen was fine. She had some funny moments, but other than that, she was pretty boring. So I didn't really care for her other than that. Moving to Thy Name is Duplicity and everything Greg here. Like, this episode is like bashing people who've got pretty positive edits before. Like, Greg and Rich got pretty positive edits here, but in this episode, they're just bashing both of them. And then Greg and Rich are forming a bond, which ultimately does come into to Greg's vote at the end. But Greg and Richard form a bond, and everybody's like bashing Greg on how he's like trying to manipulate both sides and trying to play both sides. It's like he kind of is, and he drops Colleen this episode, and his metaphor is really funny. How he's like, you have this kitten, and it's not personal. You're hungry, so you snap its neck. It's not personal, but like it's super funny. And then at Tribal Council, Jervis wins immunity here, and Greg is voted out 6-3. And Greg was a fantastic character on this season. It's so sad that he hasn't came back ever since. Even though he doesn't want to compete, he still gets the call. But he almost came back for Cambodia, and honestly, I probably would have preferred him to be on Cambodia than Kelly Wigglesworth, but yeah, Greg was a really fun character and the first ever member of the jury. He had a lot of funny moments with his little coconut telephone, and him just being an overall kooky character. And he was probably one of my favorite parts of this season. Moving on to old and new bonds, where we have Colleen winning reward, surprisingly, and people get pissed off at Richard here, where people are like, Richard's not the only one you can catch fish, huh? Because basically this past few episodes, Richard's just been saying, don't vote me off, I can catch fish. So Sue goes out and catches a fish. So Richard's getting pretty okay about it. And we go to the reward challenge. Colleen wins, surprisingly, and she takes Jenna because Jenna didn't get a video. And they talk about blindsiding Rich here. And when I first watched this, I was like, oh my god, is a Rich blindside happening? But no, Jenna goes home because strategizing. Anyways, the Toggy 4, or Toggy 3, because Kelly just left. The Toggy 3 here made a masterful move where everyone knows that he has this alphabet strategy of voting for alphabetically. But with this alphabetical order, he openly says that he's voting alphabetically, and he says who he's voting for. And they say he votes for Jenna. And the remaining Pagong members, Jenna, Jervis, and Colleen, vote for Richard. And here Richard decides to vote with Sean to take out Jenna, and Kelly just throws a vote to Sean for some reason. And Jenna was a pretty fun character. I mean, she was annoying sometimes, and then she had some game sense, but ultimately didn't have enough to survive. But I thought she was a pretty fun character, but I probably would have preferred somebody else other than her on All Stars. Moving to the crack in the alliance, where people are mad at Kelly because she flipped, and here Richard wins immunity and does a little hokey pokey dance, and Jervis is very humble about being voted out, and Jervis was a fun character on the show. I definitely feel like he was the best character. No, he was the best character. No, not the best character, but he was the best player of the Pagong tribe to me. And I felt like if everybody else was willing to form an alliance, because a ton of people this season were very passive and just wanted to vote emotionally, but Jervis just he wanted to form alliances, but nobody else wanted to. So he was kind of screwed over there where he played here. But other than that, he had a pretty fun run in Blood versus Water, which I will talk about once I get to that season. Moving on to Long Hard Days, where we have Kelly, where people really start getting bugged by Kelly here, where Kelly goes home here. She doesn't win immunity, but she pulls out the immunity win, and we get some fun moments where it's like, is it Sean or is it Colleen? But then on the beach, while it's Kelly versus Colleen in the immunity challenge, Rich is like, so who do we vote for if Kelly wins immunity? And people are like, we vote Sean. But then they vote out Colleen, which I was really confused by this, because, like, when did they flip? Like, I don't remember anything of them flipping, but they did. And Colleen was an okay character. I mean, she really got bugged by Rich, even though she came into tribal voting for Rich, but she came into final tribal voting for Rich. But she was a pretty fun character, and I wouldn't be opposed to seeing her play again, but I'm not, like, advocating for her to play again. Like, she's an okay character. She was America's sweetheart back then, so that's something. Moving on to Death of an Alliance, where Sue and Kelly just go on, and the argument between them goes on. And this is probably my favorite episode of the season, where Sean, well, I forgot to talk about this last episode, but Sean won a reward, and he promised to take Kelly, but he took Richard instead, which really got Kelly mad at him. And this time, Kelly goes home if she doesn't win immunity, but she wins immunity. And with this, they unanimously vote out Sean. And Sean was a really fun character on this season. Like, he had a ton of doofus moments, and it was so funny to just see him, like, just stumble his way through all of this, where he could have been voted out at Dirk's spot if they chose him instead of Dirk. But anyway, Sean was a really fun character this season, who I loved here. Moving on to the Final Four, where I will talk about this round by round. And the Final Four consisted of Rudy, Kelly, Susan, and Rich. And Kelly once again wins immunity after probably gonna be voted out here if she doesn't win immunity. Kelly's a horrible player. I mean, like, she actively tries to play both sides, but everybody knows she's playing both sides. Like, she doesn't try to do it stealthily. She votes with the Pagong tribe. Like, it's like, why are you doing this? You're putting a target on your back. But she wins immunity here, and we get a tied vote. And then, for some reason, Kelly flips on Sue, even though Sue is probably the last person who she can win against. I mean, she loses against Richard, and she obviously loses against Rudy. So why would you get rid of the only person left you can beat? But anyway, Sue goes home here, who is a really fun character. Her snakes and rats speech is obviously iconic, and she is a pretty fun player here too. Richard and Rudy really make this season, and I remember hating her in All Stars and Borneo. But now thinking about it now after rewatching the season, it's like she's not that bad. Moving on to Hands on a Hard Idol, where this is Richard basically does 4D chess here, where he thinks about it and he's like, if I win this, I vote out Rudy. Who I lose it if I lose against Rudy, I vote out Rudy. Rudy won't vote for me in the end because I backstabbed him. If Rudy wins this, he takes me and I lose. If Kelly wins this, he more than likely votes out Rudy and I have a shot at winning. So he decides to throw the challenge and leave it up to Kelly and Rudy to basically whoever wins immunity brings him to the finals, but it depends. If Kelly wins this immunity, he wins. If Rudy wins this immunity, he's second. So it's a very fun moment, but Kelly wins immunity here, obviously. And she votes out Rudy. And Rudy was a fun character on this season. Like, his relationship with Richard after, like, being, like, a former Navy SEAL and being opposed to homosexuals, and then eventually being, like, friends with a homosexual is a really fun storyline. And his confessionals were great, and his little jokes about him going back and getting made fun of, it was really fun. But yeah, moving on to the final tribal council, where, like, I mean, this Jenna. Okay, so Kelly makes one of the dumbest moves here, where Jenna asks her a question. Jenna asks, if you got to choose 2 people to sit in the finals other than you, who would it be? Richard says Rudy and Greg, the first and final juror, where he says that, where basically they're both on the jury, so he basically now has both of their votes. But then Kelly says 2 people who aren't even on the jury. It's like, why are you doing that? Choose 2 people who are on the jury, like Jervis and Colleen or Jenna and Colleen. Like, you're ruining relationships here and losing yourself votes. It's like, it's so dumb. But it doesn't end up mattering. And Sue basically decides the vote here, and people say, like, Kelly almost won because Greg, and it's like, nah, Greg just voted because he liked Richard more. So that's something. But Susan's Snakes and Rats speech here is iconic, and it's really sad how Richard loses a vote because Sue makes a speech. And, like, Colleen came into this voting for Richard, but then had to switch her vote to Kelly. But anyways, by a 4-3 vote, Kelly loses. And thank God Kelly didn't win this season. Like, if somebody who played terribly and had to win out and win the first season, that would be terrible. Like, through this entire season, I was rooting against Kelly and rooting for Richard. Like, Kelly's just a terrible player. How she terribly plays both sides, where if she loses any of the last 4 immunities, she goes home. Like, final 3 one's debatable. Depends who wins that. But Richard threw it, and if Rudy won that, Kelly goes home. Final 4. She loses that, all 3 vote against them. Go vote against her. At the final 6, people were like her old alliance was actively saying, if she loses this, she will go home. But she wins that immunity. At the final 5, she wins immunity, and she gets she's a terrible player, but she is good at challenges, and her coming back for Cambodia, she sucked. So this is probably her best run out of the 2. And moving on to Richard, who I thought was a very deserving winner. I mean, he formed the first ever dominant alliance, and he dominated this game strategically beginning to end. Well, not beginning to end, as he finally started working strategically during the Dirk boot. But he was a fantastic player, and somebody who I am very shocked isn't on all winners. Like, how is this guy not on all winners? Like, why? Why is he not back? But anyways, it does get a little bit uncomfortable with him in All-Stars, but he has said that he didn't touch Susan there, so that's something. But anyways, Richard was a fantastic player here and basically started the game of Survivor and is basically the godfather of Survivor other than Rob. Okay, moving on to the ranking where obviously Survivor Borneo is going to be number 1 because this is the only season we have reviewed so far. So, yeah, Survivor Borneo number 1. And overall takeaways, this was a really fun season with some really memorable characters like BB, Greg, Richard, Jervis, Jenna, Stacy, Colleen, Rudy, Sean, like all of these really fun characters. Susan, I forgot to mention her. Like all of these fun characters who some go out early, most of them make it to the end of the game. But this is a very good season of the show and definitely is one that I will remember. But it is a season that has some bad moments like the tell standpoint instead of the show standpoint, which I really hate. But yeah. Anyways, next week I will not be coming out with my Big Brother 1 review as Survivor Winners at War is ending then. So I will make a review of Survivor Winners at War, but I will not rank it into my seasons as I want to do it chronologically. So once I get around to actually chronologically reviewing the seasons and once I get to Winners at War, I am going to name it Revisiting Survivor Winners at War. So anyways, that is my Survivor Borneo review. I will see you guys next time.